So it's good to hear. Allow me to say the invocation.
Please.
Toward the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. Beloved ones of God, we have 3 books today. The Bowl Psyche Life of Samuel Lewis, 366 vignettes, Die Before Death, and Letters to Mansour from Moinini. The Bowl Psyche Life of Samuel L. Lewis, which I'll shorten to 366 vignettes in the process of this talk, contains 3 books. Let's start with an overview of each of them. 366 vignettes is the title of the first book. I began working on the Bowl of Psyche, 366 vignettes, in Boston around 1972. The book was published in 2021. It was 49 years in the making. You may want to compare that number with 39 years for Mershon and 48 years for Big Tales. I drove to people's home or business in my autoglass truck and installed autoglass and wrote while driving the truck. The vast area inside and outside Route 128 in Boston was where I did my writing. The idea for the project was to key off each one of Hazrat Inayat Khan's Bowl of Psyche aphorisms and tell how Mershid embodied each aphorism. Naturally, my early comments are quite different than the later comments, considering the years of maturity since starting the book and finishing it. I dare say, if I had approached this like Mershid did when he rewrote his commentaries, I would have rewritten my early commentaries, but I didn't. After rereading January and February in prep for this talk, I remembered how I finished writing the November and December Bowl commentaries many years later. What I found then when I turned to November 1st commentary, what did I find when I turned to the November 1st commentary? The aphorism for November 1st is, self stands as a wall between man and God. Ponder that deeply and ask yourself as I continue on, what relation my commentary had with that phrase. I began my commentary, Sufis are vision seekers. They don't act of their own accord. They ask God for guidance and ask accordingly. Each sentence after this one in my commentary is a teaching. Action without feeling is no good, I wrote. Einstein, when asked about the secret of his genius, answered, feeling before thought. I use that as a motto of the Einstein Academy, my DBA doing business as name. Most all of my books are published by the Einstein Academy because the Einstein Academy is me. My November 1st commentary went on, visions are the inner experiences which initiate action and provide the motivation for one dedicated to God. I dedicated my life to God after Taj left me. I think it was Juniette who said, first one seeks God, then one lives in God. My dedication of my life to God was me living in God. The commentary then articulated another teaching. Dedication to God is a prerequisite for selfless action, known in the East as Nishkam Karma. The commentary next refers to letter 20 in my compilation, Mershid's Last Letters to Mansour. In that book, letter 20 Murshid spoke of visions he had for this person and another. The other happened to be someone called Peter at the time. He's who we know now as Pierre Shabda. I go to letter 20 to find more. Murshid wrote, quote, "Nearly all the visions I have of a lower grade involve Peter, and of a higher grade involve you. No will in it at all," he concluded. I comment on this in 366 vignettes by writing, "This shows that the Murshid is inspired by their students as much as the students are inspired by the teacher." That is followed by, Murshid used the word vision 15 times in last letters to Mansour. I concluded the November 1st comment with, Murshid was fond of quoting, "Without vision, a nation perisheth," which is from Proverbs 29:18 in the King James Bible. I consider 366 vignettes a deep biography of Murshid. What do I mean by deep? Deep because I throw around the term God conscious and apply it to Murshid. Murshid Sam Sufis should not be shy about saying they are God conscious. Ibn Arabi writes in one of his books I read, the only one I read actually, cover to cover, and the only sentence that I could really relate to, he wrote, "God is breath." Whoa. The title of Ole Ole's course that he created is called God is Breath. In the November 1st commentary, I speak with the distance of years of experience of living in God after I had found God. We'll talk more about that when we consider Die Before Death, Mutu Kula Anta Mutu, a manual for the realization of God. I think commentaries like this one above, which seem to have nothing to do with the aphorism, might have been the reason early in the book I recommended the reader skip the Hazrat aphorism and just read Mansour's commentary. I advise this because I thought my commentary alone would give a deep picture of Murshid. The commentary above concerning the aphorism, I'll remind you again, self stands as a wall between man and God. To comment, I just went where intuition took me. Or should I say, as Murshid said to Charles Tart, which I spoke about in day one, describing his process for creating the dances, it was a combination of dream consciousness and intuition, which is what created my commentaries. Part 2 of 366 vignettes is Murshid's last letters to Mansour. There are 28 letters and 6 appendices in the book. At some point in the summer of 1970, while driving Murshid in my 1966 VW van back to San Francisco from Lama in New Mexico, Murshid went off on me. The effect of this outburst was to cause me to make the decision to stop working with him, as was my main concentration, and to find a way to make a living. What to do? That was my perennial question. Age-dependent children kindly supported my wife and son while I functioned as Murshid's chauffeur, secretary, and traveling companion. I make reference here to the story I told during day one's discussion of the book Murshid. You remember the story was racked with the angst of my perennial question, what shall I do? I requested an interview with Murshid. What shall I do, Murshid? I asked him. Well, my question was a long-term question, and Murshid answered me short-term. And what followed, and it's printed in the book, but I won't relate here, was a whole page of tasks to do right now. I didn't get it. If I'd gotten it, I didn't get it until I started preparing this talk, what he was talking about, or what it might have meant if I'd taken his answer as a long-term answer. I might still be driving Murshid, and he might still be alive because his chief chauffeur and secretary and so forth was still serving him. But that's a speculation I have made, but I won't go into. Anyway, Murshid and I are separated as a result of my decision, inspired originally by his outburst. The typewriter story, which Wally Ali draws out of me in his interview in 1976, about 6 years after Murshid's death, is in the appendix to Letters to Mansour from Moinuddin. It's appropriate to tell that story now. So after Taj eloped with Pir Vilayat, I was forced to leave the Garden of Inayat to Kanka, where 3 couples lived with Murshid when he came to Marin County. And I was on my way down the stairs and carrying my typewriter, and Murshid, who was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going next door where I have to move." He said, "Why are you taking the typewriter?" I said, "Because it's mine." And the backstory of that is, when I arrived in California, I had a small portable typewriter. And Murshid took me one day to the used typewriter store, and we walked out with a Royal Standard desktop typewriter, which I used taking dictation from Murshid. And when he said, "Where are you going with the typewriter?" it was, "This is mine, and I'm going because it's mine, and I'm going with it because it's mine." And Murshid suspended me as a disciple, and Wally Ali reported that when he reported the meeting that we had, he was absolutely livid, and so later on Wally had people go sit in the chair where he was sitting when he told the story because he figured it was full of angry Baraka. I wasn't there. Anyway, this story appears on page 40 in Letters to Mansour from Moinuddin in the appendix, which one of the 3 appendices in that book is Wally Ali's interview with me in 1976. Wally Ali's tasks after Murshid's passing, before it actually passed, well, it was probably he began this project after Murshid died, but he interviewed everybody he could think of who had anything to do with Murshid. A whole lot of interviews, which are on the Ruhaniyat website. And so I took his interview with me, and I also took his interview, I'm not clear he was the interviewer who interviewed Moinuddin and Fatima. But in any case, I printed that as the 3rd appendix in Letters to Mansour from Moinuddin, because the interesting thing, I don't know, maybe I'm going to say this again later on, Moinuddin said, "Mansour is my first guru." I think maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'll elaborate on that later, I can't remember. Anyhow, Wally Ali challenged me when I said I never felt an opposition to Murshid. "You never felt an opposition? What about the typewriter incident?" Well, I answered, the situation was this. Taj went with Pir, and I was moving with my typewriter from the Garden of Inayat to the Alhamdulillah Ranch across the street. And you've heard the story, so I don't need to repeat it. So Murshid and I are divorced. I'm suspended, no longer taking letters or driving him around. And for 2 months, up to 3 weeks before his fatal accident, he was keeping me abreast of his activities by sending me personal letters and copies of letters to others. Out of the 28 letters, only 4 of them were personal letters to me. The people he wrote to and sent copies of included Wally Ali, who got 5 letters. Amina Erickson got one letter. She was a Marine who lived with Amin Kwanz at the Garden of Allah, the Sufi house in Corte David H. Stern got a letter. Mr. Stern was used by Merchant as a straw man to attack, among other things, world organizations who seek funds but will not acknowledge letters. Or his spiritual prowess. It was similar to his experience with H. Clive Ross, or F. Clive Ross in London, which I spoke about in day one, and how, well, you heard that already. Archie Baum got 3 letters. I met Professor Baum when Merchant and I visited him in Albuquerque, where he was a philosophy professor at the University of New Mexico. Amin Kwanz got a letter. I already mentioned Amin and Amina Erickson, who was his partner. Finley F. Dunn Jr. got a letter. He was secretary for the Temple of Understanding, which we attended the meeting of the Temple of Understanding together in Geneva. Art Hoppe got 2 letters. He's a humorist who wrote for the San Francisco Chronicle, and often Merchant would start his letter writing day by writing a hilarious letter to Art Hoppe at the Chronicle. Russ Joyner got a letter. Russ was the secretary of a local group Merchant was often at odds with, called the International Society for General Semantics. Amartya and Julie Cohen, his wife, got a letter. Amartya was the director for the movie Subsea, who, by the way, gave me employment after I had been divorced from Merchant. We made the movie. I functioned as an everything for that. Robert Frank, the hippie, well-known still photographer, was brought in one day to film when we were over in the mountains in Marin County. And it was a blue sky day, and small clouds were in the sky. I was assistant camera. This time I was loading the magazines and changing the f-stop as requested. And Robert took out his light meter, read it. He set the aperture. I looked at what he said. It was like, whoa, that can't be right. So I changed it. He saw me change it. He changed it back. None of his footage was usable. None of it. Threw it out. Benesha Guest got a letter. She spearheaded Merchant's Eat, Dance, and Pray program in the Middle East. And I went with Benesha to Israel in the 70s. And we did eat, dance, and pray with people. She had a camp. Still a good friend. She just turned 80. Sally Ann Schreiber got a letter. She was a Marine we met when we arrived in Boston at the Temple of Understanding in Geneva. Barkat Ali, Merchant's Merchant in Pakistan, got a letter. Swami Ranganathananda got a letter. I went into Samadhi whenever I was in the presence of Swami Ranganathananda. One of the times was at the Temple of Understanding. Merchant and I were eating breakfast in the cafeteria. Swami Rama walked by and slapped me on the back. I went up to the room. I'm in the bathtub weeping. And Merchant said, "What's the matter?" I said, "It's the love." And Merchant referred to Swami Ranganatha as the greatest man in the world. He was an Indian. Asha Murchandani got a letter. We met him in Geneva at the Temple of Understanding conference. Sadi Kaur Khan, his goddaughter, got a letter. Sadi is from Pakistan. She came to California. Ananda Ashram in Kanhangor, South India, got a letter. That's where Merchant went and sat on the cushions, a story that Saul told about. He tried to do the lotus, and Swami Ramdas said, no, No, here's a pile of cushions, you sit on those. So he wrote on ashram. And finally, Lama Foundation, where Mercy visited and where he's buried, got a letter. The people that contributed memories in 6 appendices in that book are Benedict Guest, Jonathan Lewis, Joan Satara Tesler, David Shahabuddin Les, Shahid Khan, and Sally Ann Schreiber. 4 of the 28 letters, as I mentioned, were to me. The rest are copies of Mercy's letters to those people I mentioned above. Why don't we follow the thread from letter 20, which I quoted from earlier, where Mercy said, I had visions of a lower order about Shabbat and visions of a higher order about you. It would be 3 weeks after he wrote letter 24 before his fatal accident. He wrote that on November 6, 1970. He was in New York on the East Coast tour, and Shabda was his chauffeur, and in fact told him at that time, like I used to be. And this is written about in the 5th appendix in the Mercy's last letter to Mansour. It's a long letter. I delayed rereading it as I was preparing this talk, knowing these 12 paragraphs that end, this is a quote, this is sent to strengthen your courage, your aims, your purposes, your ideals, and your actions. Those will be the final words that he wrote to me. The third book in this book is Seosan's Text for Zen Buddhism. And Seosan's Text for Zen Buddhism is a Zen manual used by Korean Buddhists to this day. The book was translated by Dr. Kyungbo Seo, who is Mercy's Korean Zen master. He was in the line of Seosan, who functioned 400 years ago. He asked Mercy to get the book published. Mercy began the process and corrected the grammar and made a typescript that I copied. Since Mercy was involved in the literary history of this book, he is acknowledged when it says, edited by Samuel Lewis. To enable publication, Mercy asked me to make copies of the manuscript. The copies were intended for 3 other Zen masters in the Bay Area, Neville Warwick, Eugene Wagner, and Joe Meller. It turns out that Joe Meller's friend from the Theosophical Society in San Francisco was a man named Don Gilbert.
Yes.
Who just happened to be the successor, the named successor of Kyungbo Seo.
The what?
Of Dr. Kyungbo Seo, who was Mercy's Zen master. And that's in the line of Seo-san, who wrote the manual that is published in this book. I learned about Don Gilbert while preparing this book for publication. I learned he started a Buddhist retreat center in Missouri called the United Buddhist Church. I checked their website with great trepidation. What, I thought, if he published the book already? Obviously, he should have published the book already if Dr. Kyungbo Seo was his teacher and Seo-san was Kyungbo Seo's teacher. But lo and behold, he did. Ooh. In fact, Dr. Kyungbo Seo's last correspondence with Reverend Yi Guang, Mercy's Zen name, Seo thanked him for, quote, your great contribution for the correction and trying to publish. Apparently satisfied with the effort, but not the publication. Now it is published. My editor's introduction is titled Dharma Transition Looks Like This. That title describes this manuscript's history pretty well. First, there was Seosan in 1564, who said he consulted all the writings that he could find and selected 100 passages. Seosan, back then, was recognized at an early age as a genius because at age 10, he was well-versed in Confucian literature. When his father died, the governor, recognizing his genius, supported his studies. After 8 years of Zen studies, we're talking about the guy from 1500, he obtained enlightenment after hearing the cry of a rooster. His enlightenment poem was this: though the hair turns gray, the mind not so. And as the old man has already divulged so, hearing abruptly a cock crying, I finished all my work as a man. That's it. The text for Zen Buddhism is the only text of Zen used by Korean Buddhists. Dr. Khyentse Seo wrote. The preface by the author himself, Master Seo, is dated 1564. The Reverend Elder Seosan tells how he searched the sutras and selected 100 meaningful passages. By the time the manuscript reached Mershid, there were 80. Centuries later, Dr. Khyentse Seo decided to promote the book in the West. And the introduction is by Dr. Khyentse Seo, PhD. He calls Seosan one of the greatest Zen Korean priests. And with that, we'll move on to the second book. Mutu Kubla Anta Mutu, Die Before Death, a manual for the realization of God. I will subsequently refer to the book as Mutu. Hazrat Anand Khan uses that phrase as a definition of die before death, and Murshid Sadi had a different version, but I stuck with Hazrat Anand Khan's version. And nobody challenged me when I put for the subtitle of Mutu, a manual for the realization of God. And perhaps it is because people knew that Ibn Arabi wrote God is breath. And if they hadn't read Ibn Arabi, they took Wali Ali's course, God is breath. All of Sam's students who practice his teachings on breath culture from this first series of Gothic consciousness are, dare say, are God conscious. This book shows that each person's illumination is unique. It concerns my retreat with Pir Balai, that Pir Balai put me on, rather. What started as a 10-day retreat, which I took at home in the Conga in Boston, in the town of Roxbury, which is mostly black district, which my children at the time, Nathan and Amanda, my goddaughter, attended school there. And they hid from me the fact that they got beaten up quite often because we were whites in a predominantly black area. But in fact, the man that across the street strangled me, and he was white. So I don't think there was any racism involved. It's just nastiness, I think. Mershid Tajanaya, senior woman teacher in Nayati stream, described the book as, quote, a worthy addition to the long lineage of mystical writings. Wally van der Zeen, author of The Sufi Path of Love and Understanding, he's a European Sufi, wrote in a blurb, Mansour's experience of a solo retreat reads like a classic dervish handbook with experiences and quotes that will be of interest to any spiritual teacher. Mutu has the longest table of contents I've ever created. It's 11 pages long, which shows, or it could show, that it's full of vignettes. And each vignette I gave a title to. And I'm talking single space 11 pages, so 30 lines on a page times 11. There's a lot of vignettes in this book. Wally's review nails it when he says it reads like a classic dervish handbook with experiences and quotes. One highlight of Mutu was a poem received in dream in answer to my fervent prayers to have a deep experience. I presented a portion of that poem when I gave a talk day one concerning Mansur's collected poems. Goddess of Sea was the title. Another realization described in Mutu happened in the second title, Love Bath. I wrote, quote, and with the crying came to me revelation after revelation. One about Fikr, another about Chagall. The secret of Fikr, I'm still quoting myself, secret of Fikr is crying like a baby. This statement is almost incomprehensible to me today until I reconstruct a baby's cry and remember how it is done with all its heart. The secret of Chagall, I'm still quoting from the book, is revealed by putting your head underwater. Underwater, the senses are stopped automatically, whereas the traditional instructions to perform Chagall involve shutting the eyes and the ears and the nose and the mouth with your hands. I chose as an ending for the book the epilogue after Attar. Attar was a Sufi poet. At the age of 75, he died a violent death, which the Mongols inflicted on Nishapur in April of 1221. And Nishapur is another tomb of a well-known poet, Omar Khayyam. I visited Nishapur and Alexander the Great were too. Admittedly, I copied the epilogue after Attar. Precisely, exactly, except I substituted my name. When he wrote, I substituted my name for his name when he wrote his name, put it in the poem. It begins like this. Oh, Mansur, you have scattered on the world the contents of the vessel of the musk of secrets. The horizons of the world are full of your perfume, and lovers are disturbed because of you. Your verses are your soul, and they are known as Mutu, Kula, Anta Mutu, or die before death. Finally, let us take up the ninth and last book, Letters to Mansur from Moinuddin. Perhaps here I can quote the poem I wrote in Iowa City, where Moinuddin was a bartender at Little Bill's Tavern. And as this was written during our crass and psychedelic period, it shows some paranoia. The title is taken from a popular song at the time, Hey, you better hide your love away. Hey, Karl Jablonski and Talmud Bills, there's a CIA man here now on pills. He's a head, lawman, badge bearer, red communist. In Talmud Bills, there's a man going to bust us. He goes on. But now, the script says to tell you how we got to San Francisco from Iowa City. Taj and I were in Michigan, and I was teaching at the university, Northern Michigan University, And Fatima and Moineen were a couple, headed out to San Francisco. We're up in Marquette, Michigan, where you can't see the sun for 9 months. And the piles of snow at each corner are taller than cars, so that every car has to have a flag on it so you can see a car coming when you get to the intersection. So Moineen and Fatima had recorded The Human Being at Golden Gate Park, which had music and Allen Ginsberg reading poems, and it was a flavor of the whole hippie scene that was happening then. My wife and I went out. I resigned after 1 year, teaching in a beautiful job I had, where I was allowed to present all the books I wanted in an advanced novel course. Included Ulysses and Hermann Hesse and Kurt Vonnegut, who, by the way, was my teacher at the University of Iowa's Writers' Workshop. Moineen says in Wally Ali's interview with him and Fatima, featured in Appendix 3 of Letters to Mansour, from Moineen, Mansour was my first guru, Moineen wrote. I was kind of on an atheist trip, Moineen told the interviewer, and Mansour, no matter what was said, always said that God was real. And that he connected or identified God with the experience of oneness, which he got glimpses of during our psychedelic drug experiences. Of course, Moineen carried on as pure Murshid after Murshid died for many years. Did our realization of Moineen's mind pave the way for Murshid's death? It's something that has weighed on me for years. There was a quote from the movie, Sunseed. When Murshid was interviewed, he was asked by the film's director, and I was in the room, I was just behind the camera because I was working as a film technician while the movie was made. Murshid was asked by the film director, just a voice out of the background, what he wanted to see before he died. Saul remembered, Murshid said, I want 1 or 2 of my students to get it. Amartat then asked, how will you know when they got it? Murshid replied, by their light. So let's recall Murshid's first meeting with Hazrat Inayat Khan. Quote, when he was 28, when Murshid was 28, in June of 1923, he had a vision of the arrival of Hazrat Inayat Khan and his mystical immersions with him. The next day at noon, the summer solstice, Murshid is summoned to meet the great man, Murshid Hazrat Inayat Khan. Samuel walks into the room only to see a tremendous light. He couldn't see the teacher, just light filling the room. Come, don't be afraid, said Hazrat Inayat Khan. Compare this to what Bashish, a sheikh in Marin County, who was the editor of the Revised San Francisco Oracle and a soloist in the Sufi choir, wrote. But first I'll set the scene. I'm sitting there in a chair on the right hand of Murshid. And Moineen is seated to the left of Murshid. And we're in a room external to the dance hall in San Anselmo, California. And people signed up to have interviews. Now I'll quote Bashish, which is what I quoted in Murshid. Murshid is giving interviews in a room off to the side of the dance hall at the seminary in San Anselmo. As I walked into the darkened room, I was unexpectedly blinded by a great sphere of light. Merchant was in the center of the light, and two of his advanced Marines sat on either side. Far from being reassured by the light, it added to my fear until out of the light, Merchant's voice came saying, "Do not be afraid. We've not come to condemn you, but to praise you." Merchant and Mansour, Moinudin and Mansour were in Samadhi with Merchant. The light was visible. "How will you know?" Merchant was asked. "By their light." Recall that I left Merchant shortly before he died in the summer of 1970. Recall that he kept in touch with me for months after, from September to October. Recall that when he fell down the stairs, I wasn't surprised. I felt that Merchant had forewarned me and encouraged me to distance myself from him, to avoid the agony of separation I would have felt if we were still so closely linked. That was an interpretation I eventually arrived at after our divorce. Merchant said in the movie, when two or more of my students got it, he could die. He said their light would be the sign. Moinudin and Mansour went into Samadhi with Merchant and Sen and Samo, and Bashish told about it. Those are the facts. And I include this in the mix of my leaving him. Did he perhaps conclude that my leaving him meant his work was done? I think he did. I think I've said enough about Muttu and letters from Moinudin. I would like to conclude with the question, what happened to me after Merchant built me up with such high expectations, saying his lower grade visions concerned Shabda and his higher grade visions concerned me? I worked as a handyman and moving grip and stage carpenter. I carried on with a Merchant photo and book selling business. I sort of organized myself under the radar like Saul has done in the establishment of the DHO. No bank account, no trail, just the devotion of the devotees who come to these gatherings held at Alton Collins Retreat Center. I haven't been invited for 50 years to the Sufi gatherings in the Redwoods. I haven't been offered a speaking role at any of the Jamiats. I haven't been made a merchant. No, Saul, rejected avatar, though I may be, I wrote books to make my mark. My books are my legacy, all of which I have humbly introduced for you all here over 3 days. Thank you for the privilege, and thank you all for listening. Are there any questions?
Did you take visa? Wow. Do you need water?
No, I just need to blow my nose.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I was kind of not joking. Can you have a capacity to take a Visa card for your books?
Let's see, do I have that capacity? That would mean I would have to have I could take PayPal.
Oh, I'll write a check.
I could take checks. But I don't have any more books to sell.
Oh, isn't that fun?
But my address and contact and so forth are on that page on
That's
the,
great.
on the table.
Good to know.
I invite you to buy all of them. I invited another elegant, esteemed person here to buy all of them, and she broke down in laughter. Well, actually, one of my students, who wasn't particularly close, 30 years after he was my student in Boston, and I was in Arizona, he bought all the books.
Smart.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
So happy, so glad. Anywho, any further questions?
Thanks for all the work of collecting and your also inspiration and consideration of telling these stories. It's a great wealth of wisdom for all of us.
It's my legacy, because I didn't do, like I said, any of
Yeah,
these
yeah.
things.
Yeah,
But the books live on, I hope, and they tell stories that, that no one else could tell. I'll repeat the story, well, a story about how you're still good. It's not even 10 till.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Merchant took all those years to finish, and people were always asking for Merchant stories. I told this story before, and I would say, no, too soon. I'm not telling any stories because I'm saving them for the book. I didn't want to ruin it. I didn't want to. Merchant, the book has hundreds of stories, hundreds, and to choose 11 of them for this presentation, I just had to. Well, here's how I did it. I still have the hardback from when the book came out, and there's like 17 markers in it, which contained something that I thought was really important. So I had to read 34 pages, 17 markers, but there's two sides of the page where they were marked. I had to read 34 pages to find out what I might produce or present here. So that's how I ended up with those 11 that I presented. And, well, any further questions? So let's just conclude this so that Marianne can be on her way.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you have any other project that's you're looking to delve into?
No, every time something like this camp is over, I have a midlife crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at, or will be at in about a day.
Yeah.
That's why everybody who's 80 or stuff, retired, they say, well, what do you do in your spare time now? And I volunteer here and I do this. And well, in fact, I did volunteer 3 months ago when my last midlife crisis was happening. I volunteered to collect signatures for the Arizona Abortion Access Initiative. They needed 300,000 signatures to put the initiative on the Arizona ballot in November. So they always wanted to get more. And I collected 529 signatures, went door to door. I had a woman who active in the Democratic Party, and she gave me a ream. Oh no, I ended up with a ream of addresses of Democrats. And so I knocked doors, and I went and sat outside the library, and I pestered people that were walking in. Have you signed? And got all the signatures, and we now have like, well, 600,000 or 700,000. So unless the Republicans find some dirty trick to get rid of a lot of them, it will be on the ballot, and Arizona will be in the Constitution, so that women will always have the ability to get an abortion. All right, let's
Okay.
let you get out of here.
Okay, thanks.
Right on time.
Thanks so much for being here.